Today's comparison is the battle between segments. Yes, the Ford EcoSport 1-litre EcoBoost comes in the compact SUV space, while the VW Polo GT TSI is a premium hatchback. But both these cars have one thing in common. Both come with compact turbocharged petrol engines, which are a joy to drive. So which one is the better driver's car and which one should you invest your hard-earned money in? Let's find out on the show today. So here I'm in the back seat of the new Ford EcoSport, and compared to the Polo, this is a much more roomier place to be in. As you can see, headroom is more than it is in the Polo, and knee room is also very generous. And what Ford have done is a very good thing. They have raised the front seats, so I have place below them where I can stretch my feet. Also, it is a wider car at the back than the Polo, and the hump in the floor panel isn't as big as the one on the Polo. So in that sense, this is a better car for rear seat occupants, and also a better car if you want to be chauffeur driven. But of course, these cars aren't really meant to be chauffeur driven, and then really the fun is in the front seats. Well, here I'm in the back seat of the Polo GT TSI, and as you can see, it's not as spacious as the EcoSport, and that is quite understandable. Headroom is decent, even for someone who is as tall as I am, and my height for reference is 5'10", but knee room isn't as generous as the EcoSport, but there is place below the front seats where I can stretch my feet. But that said, it's not a great car for practicality either, because the door bins don't have any bottle holders in them, unlike the EcoSports. Well, so here I'm in the front seats of the EcoSport, and the first thing you will notice is that the dashboard, the quality levels aren't as good as the one on the Polo GT TSI, and really it does not feel as solidly put together as the Polo is. So that's one area where the Polo has a clear advantage. Well, but that said, because you sit up so high, you get a very good view of the road ahead. The large glass area also adds to the sense of space inside this cabin, and you also get these little quarter glasses over here, which means that visibility is very good when you are cutting this car into corners. All that, along with the fact that this is a very practical cabin, and more practical than the Polo, because you get a lot of places to keep your odds and ends, means that for sheer practicality as well as overall comfort on those long journeys, this is a better car. So here I am inside the cabin of the VW Polo GT TSI, and the first thing you'll notice is the sheer quality of the cabin. Everything really is phenomenal, and even the smaller switchgear over here, like the button for the volume control as well as these small buttons for the AC, are very good to operate. Well, this car comes completely loaded. You get ESP, you get climate control, you also get steering mounted controls for the stereo system, and you also get this sensational steering wheel, which is flat bottom. It really is much better to grip than the one on the EcoSport. So in that sense, this cabin has a lot more sportiness to it, as well as a sense of classiness. In terms of sheer quality as well as ambience, it is the Polo GT TSI which has the edge over the EcoSport. Well, so here I am driving the Ford EcoSport now, and remember, this car comes with a 1-litre EcoBoost engine, and that engine develops about 123 bhp of power, which is a lot more than the 102 bhp that the Polo GT TSI makes. That said, in terms of outright performance, there's very little to choose between both these cars. Well, one area where the EcoSport has a slight advantage over the Polo is in the fact that you can drive this car on the worst of roads out there, and that's largely because of its high ground clearance, and also the suspension seems to have been tuned to tackle Indian roads better. Well, the firm suspension of the EcoSport means that some of the crevices do filter into the cabin, and at slower speeds in the city you will feel a lot of those big bumps enter the cabin. But that said, on the highway this car really does offer you a very reassuring ride, and does offer a lot of confidence as well as stability when you are doing speeds in excess of 100 kph. Well, the manual gearbox on the EcoSport is decent to operate, the throws are decent, and it's pretty sporty in that sense. Well, the EcoBoost engine isn't very responsive from lower throttle inputs, and what that means is that you will have to dial in those revs. You will have to pull this engine above 1500-1600 RPM to make it feel responsive and lively. So in that sense, the Polo has a slight advantage, because that engine feels a lot more responsive from as little as 1200-1300 RPM. And also the EcoSport's engine does not have the same throaty exhaust note that the Polo's engine delivers. So in that sense, again, the Polo has a slight advantage. But in terms of body roll, remember, this car is a lot more taller than the Polo and is much more highly set. So what that means is that it will have some bit of body roll, and it is natural to have that little bit of lean when you're pushing into corners. While where the Polo has the advantage over the EcoSport is in the fact that the Polo feels a lot more dynamic, as well as keener to change lanes. The EcoSport steering wheel isn't as responsive or as crisp as the one on the Polo, and in that sense it does feel slightly behind in terms of overall dynamics and does not really enjoy being pushed into corners as well. Well, so here I'm driving the Polo GT TSI, and remember this car comes with a 1.2 litre turbocharged petrol engine, and this engine develops about 102 bhp of power, and all that power is transmitted through this phenomenal 7-speed automatic gearbox. Now this gearbox uses dual clutches. Well, if you want to use this gearbox manually, all you need to do is move it onto the left and use the Tiptronic function on it. But if you still want to use it in automatic mode but want better performance, then you need to pull it all the way back and use it in the S mode or the sports mode. And what that mode essentially does is that it holds on to the revs a lot longer and makes this car feel a lot more livelier, and the engine is a lot more brisker than when it is in the normal mode. Well, what the 7-speed gearbox essentially does to the Polo's character is the fact that it makes this car feel very flexible. The engine, even though it's only 1.2 litres in capacity, feels very flexible when you're on the highway. So if you are doing speeds in excess of 110 kph, the engine is spinning at a relatively low 2100, 2200 RPM, which makes the cabin a very calm and very quiet place to sit in. Well, unlike the high set seats on the EcoSport, the low set seats on the Polo make it feel like a much more sportier car, and that along with its dynamic chassis makes this a much more sportier car to drive. The steering wheel is really the big differentiator between this car and the EcoSport. The steering wheel on this car is a lot more communicative as well as a lot more feelsome than the one on the EcoSport, and that along with the fact that the suspension has been tuned for sporty handling makes this a much more dynamic car to be in than the EcoSport. Well, if I had to describe the performance of this car compared to the EcoSport in one word, that one word would be effortless. And even though it is down on power compared to the EcoSport, which remember is 123 bhp, this car really does fly as soon as you hit that accelerator pedal hard. So not only is the Polo a very sporty car to drive in the city or on the track, it's also a very good car on the highway when you compare it with the EcoSport. Well, even though the Ford EcoSport offers you more practicality as well as more cabin space, if you are after pure driving thrills, then nothing can come close to the VW Polo GT TSI at this price point. And that means that this car is the winner of this comparison today.